Rommel's Panzer Army on Afrika had 81 operational tanks on the night of October 23, 1942. Montgomery had 29. The Germans had fuel for 3 days of combat. The battle lasted 12. You are 23 years old and you are from Wuppertal in the Ruhr Valley, where your father worked at a textile dye factory on the Ruhr River. The thing you remember most about home is the color of that river, which ran red or blue or green depending on what the factory was processing that week. Never the same color twice in a row. Never the color a river is supposed to be. You have been in North Africa for 14 months. You are the driver of a Panzer III OSF-J hull number 413, assigned to the 15th Panzer Division. You know this machine the way you know your own body, which vents run hot after 30 minutes, which track link has the small crack in it that has not gotten worse in 6 weeks, but has not gotten better either. Which way the turret sticks when the sand gets into the traverse mechanism after a dust storm. The desert in late October is not the desert of summer. The temperature at night drops to 12 degrees Celsius and the air has a quality that is almost cold, almost European. Sometimes in the hour before dawn when the sky goes from black to a deep blue-gray, you could almost believe you were somewhere else entirely. Almost. Your tank is positioned in a prepared defensive line 3 kilometers south of the coast road, hull down behind a low ridge of sand and rock. To your east, somewhere beyond the 8 kilometers of open desert that separates you from the British lines, Montgomery is preparing something. You can feel it the way you feel weather coming, a change in the pressure of things, a stillness that is not peace, but its opposite. Your commander, Feldwebel Roth, told the crew this morning that the British would not attack. He said their supply lines were overextended and their infantry had no stomach for night operations in the desert. He said this with the certainty of a man who has not looked at a fuel gauge recently. You checked the fuel gauge. You have 180 liters. Enough for approximately 90 kilometers of desert travel, less in combat, considerably less if you need to maneuver at speed. The nearest fuel depot is at Tobruk, 100 kilometers to the west. You do not say this to Roth. You have learned that there are things you know and things that are useful to say out loud, and these are not always the same things. You eat your evening ration sitting on the hull of the tank, black bread and tinned sardines, watching the stars come out over the desert. The stars in the desert are different from the stars at home, closer and more numerous, and without the orange haze that sits over the Ruhr Valley at night from the factory smoke. You have a letter in your breast pocket from your mother that arrived 3 weeks ago, and that you have read 7 times. She says your father's factory is still operating. She says the neighborhood is quiet. She says do not worry about things here. You read it again in the last of the light. Then you put it away and you climb back inside the tank. It begins at 2140 hours and it begins all at once, which is the thing you were not prepared for. Not the sound itself, but the simultaneity of it. 882 British guns opening up at the same moment across a 40-kilometer front. The sound arriving as a single event rather than a sequence of events, a wall of noise that is physical before it is audible. Something you feel in your sternum and your back teeth before your ears have processed it. You are inside the tank when it starts, sitting in the driver's seat running through the pre-combat checks you do every evening out of habit. Checking the fuel gauge again as if the number has changed since afternoon. It has not. The barrage landing on the German lines begins approximately 4 kilometers to your east, in the minefields and forward positions where the infantry is dug in. The sound is continuous. There is no gap between individual shells. There is only the sound, which does not stop. You have been shelled before. You were at Gazala in June. You were at Tobruk. You were at Alam Halfa in September, where the fuel situation was already bad and the attack failed in 3 days because the tanks ran dry before they reached their objectives. You know what artillery sounds like. This is not what artillery sounds like. This is what artillery sounds like when someone has enough of it. You sit in the driver's seat and you listen and you count, which is what you do when you need to do something with your hands and there is nothing to do. You count the seconds between the moment the barrage started and the moment you expect it to lift. It does not lift. At 2200 hours it has been firing for 20 minutes without interruption. At 2230 hours Roth opens the commander's hatch and looks east and closes it again without saying anything. At 2300 hours the British infantry begins to move through their own barrage behind a creeping curtain of fire. 80,000 men advancing across the minefield on a front that is 9 kilometers wide. You do not know this yet. You know the barrage has been going for 80 minutes, and the fuel gauge still reads 180 liters, and the track link with the small crack in it is going to matter very soon. You sit in the dark inside the tank and you wait. The orders when they come are to hold the line, which is the order you were already following, and then to counterattack, which requires fuel you do not have, and then to hold again. Your Panzer III moves forward twice in the first 48 hours, both times to support infantry positions being overrun on the northern sector, both times returning to the hull-down position because there is not fuel to do otherwise. The British tanks you encounter are Shermans and Grants, American-built, and they are better than what you faced at Gazala. The Sherman's 75mm gun can kill a Panzer III at 800 meters. Your 50mm gun can kill a Sherman at 500 meters on a good shot, at the right angle, in good visibility. The desert in daylight is not good visibility. The dust from the vehicles and the shell bursts creates a haze that sits at 2 meters above the ground and reduces effective range to 400 meters on most engagements. You learn to drive by sound and by the positions of shadows in the dust. You learn when Roth is going to order a shot by the way his voice changes in the intercom, a half second before the command, a shift in register that gives you time to brace. On the third day, your loader, a boy from Munich named Werner who joined the division 4 months ago and still writes home every week, takes a piece of shell casing through the upper arm during an open hatch moment outside the tank. It is not a serious wound. Werner wraps it himself with a field dressing and does not report it because reporting it means leaving the tank, and leaving the tank means the crew is one man short. He keeps loading. You watch him do it and you do not say anything, and he does not say anything, and this is how the tank keeps moving. On October 28, the fuel situation stops being a background fact and becomes the only fact. Your tank has 40 liters remaining, enough to move approximately 20 kilometers less in combat. The resupply convoy from Tobruk was destroyed by British aircraft 2 days ago on the coast road, 11 fuel trucks burning in a column, visible from your position as a line of black smoke columns spaced evenly along the horizon, one after another like something being counted. There are 11 columns of smoke. You count them. The division has received orders to withdraw to a secondary line 15 kilometers to the west. 15 kilometers is within your fuel range if you drive in a straight line at economical speed. It is not within your fuel range if the route involves maneuvering, detours around British positions, or any engagement with enemy armor. Roth tells the crew the resupply will come through before the withdrawal. He says this the way he says things when he is not certain, a flatness in the voice that means the words are placeholders for information he does not have. You do not respond. You think about the track link with the crack in it. You have been thinking about it for 6 weeks as a problem you would address when there was time, and there has never been time, and now there is also no fuel. The combination of these two things has a shape you recognize. That night you sleep in the driver's seat, because sleeping outside the tank means something can happen to the tank, and the tank is the only thing between you and the desert, which will kill you slowly and without any particular malice, simply because it is the desert and you are in it. You sleep for 4 hours. You wake at 0300 and the stars are out and the Ruhr Valley is 3,800 kilometers to the north. Your mother is in a house on a street where the river runs some color that is not the color a river is supposed to be. You do not know what color it is tonight. You think about this for a while. Then you start the engine, and you check the fuel gauge, and you wait for it to be light enough to see. The order to retreat comes on November 4th and the retreat immediately becomes something else, which is a movement of whatever vehicles still have fuel, trying to stay ahead of whatever vehicles do not. Your tank has 12 liters when the order comes. You know before Roth calculates it that 12 liters will not reach the secondary line and will not reach Tobruk and will not reach anything that is not the desert itself. You drive west on the coast road for 8 kilometers, and then the engine stops. Not from damage, not from a British shell. The engine stops because there is nothing left to burn, a fact as simple and complete as any fact you have encountered in 14 months in this desert. A sentence with no subordinate clause. You sit in the driver's seat for a moment after the engine stops, your hands still on the controls, the tank still warm from the inside. The desert outside the vision port, exactly the same color, It has been every morning for 14 months, that particular pale tan that is not quite yellow and not quite white, and not quite the color of anything you saw before you came here. Roth gives the order to destroy the tank. You take out the thermite charges from the storage bracket where they have been sitting for 14 months. You place them at the engine block and the gun breech. You set the fuses. You take your mother's letter from your breast pocket. You fold it one more time, smaller, and put it in your trouser pocket, where it will be harder to lose. You climb out of the tank. You walk west on the coast road with the rest of the crew, Werner's arm in a sling now, Roth carrying the radio codes, the four of you moving on foot in the pale morning light. Behind you the thermite burns and the Panzer III that you have driven for 14 months becomes the kind of thing the desert is already full of, a shape in the sand with no fuel left in it. The coast road runs straight to the west, flat and white, and the Mediterranean is visible to the north, the same blue it is every day. You walk toward whatever is at the end of it. You do not know what is at the end of it. The river at home runs whatever color it runs today. You will not know until you get there.